Hey everyone, so today we're diving into a philosophy that might just be the perfect antidote for our incredibly noisy, argumentative world, ancient skepticism. And trust me, it is probably not what you think it is. The goal is surprisingly modern, and it all kicks off with one really powerful question. Yeah, what if? This question really gets to the core of it all. What if the real key to a peaceful mind isn't about finding all the right answers, but about learning how to be totally okay with not knowing them at all? It sounds a little weird, I know, but just stick with me on this. So try to picture ancient Greece, but instead of serene marble temples, imagine a place buzzing with constant, furious debate. You had Stoics arguing with Epicureans, Platonists arguing with, well, pretty much everyone. For a lot of people, this endless clash of ideas wasn't enlightening, it was just exhausting. It was deeply distressing. And this mental turmoil, this anxiety of never being sure who to believe, that's the exact problem that ancient skepticism tried to solve. Okay, so to really get their solution, we first have to kind of reset our definition of the word skeptic. We need to unlearn the way we use that word today. You see, the original Greek word, skepsis, doesn't mean doubt or disbelief like we think. It actually means investigation. So an ancient skeptic wasn't some grumpy person who just denied everything. Nope. They were a dedicated, relentless inquirer. Think of them like a philosophical detective. And this right here, this is the absolute key. Today, when we hear skeptic, we think of someone who doubts claims to knowledge, the prove it to me type. But the ancients were digging at something much deeper, the problem of belief itself. They figured out that rigidly clinging to beliefs, that was the real source of all that mental turmoil. All right, so within this whole life of inquiry, two major branches popped up. They each had a slightly different method and, more importantly, a totally different endgame. So on one side, you had the academic skeptics. They loved to argue, especially with the Stoics, and their main goal was to live a consistent, rational life. But then you have the Pyrrhonians on the other side. They used different tools, and their goal was something way more personal and, honestly, a lot more radical. Yeah, the Pyrrhonians weren't just in it to win debates or score intellectual points. They were on a mission for a quiet mind. They literally wanted to find a cure for that feeling of anxiety you get from being pulled in 1,000 different directions by 1,000 different ideas. So how in the world did they do it? Well, their path to this quiet mind is one of the most counterintuitive and frankly fascinating stories in the history of philosophy. Their goal actually had a name, ataraxia. It translates to tranquility, but it's so much more than just being calm. It's a state of being completely unshakable, totally free from the disturbance and worry that comes from holding on to firm beliefs. This was their holy grail. So how did they find it? Well, the amazing thing is they kind of stumbled into it by accident. The whole process starts with that turmoil we talked about, that inner chaos. So to try and fix it, you investigate, you look into an issue. But here's the kicker. For any strong argument you find, you also find an equally strong, equally convincing counter-argument. You're at a total stalemate. So what do? You just stop. You suspend judgment. You stop trying to decide who's right. And then, like magic, something incredible happens. They discovered that tranquility, that ataraxia, just follows. It was said to follow the suspension of judgment as a shadow follows a body. And this move, this is the secret sauce. It's called epike, the suspension of judgment. It's an active, conscious decision to just let go, to not say this is true or this is false. You simply stop trying to land on one side or the other. This is the radical move at the very heart of their practice. Okay, I know what you're thinking. This all sounds very peaceful, sure, but it also sounds completely impossible, right? I mean, how do you even function in the real world if you don't believe in anything? Let's tackle that head on. This is the classic pushback. Philosophers call it the apraxia charge. Basically, if you don't believe that the wagon hurtling towards you is real, or that getting hit is a bad thing, what's to stop you from just getting run over? Can a skeptic even perform the simplest action like crossing the street? And the skeptics had a brilliant and very practical answer for this. They said, look, you don't need to live by rigid, dogmatic beliefs. Instead, you can just live by appearances. You just follow 4 simple guides. You're guided by your natural perceptions. You're compelled by your basic feelings like hunger and thirst. You follow the local customs and traditions, and you rely on the skills you've been taught. You don't need to believe with absolute certainty that the wagon is dangerous. It simply appears dangerous, and that's more than enough to get you to jump out of the way. One of the great Pyrrhonian writers, Sextus Empiricus, summed it all up perfectly. The skeptic basically lives their life like a careful reporter of their own experience. They can say, well, honey appears sweet to me, but they don't take that extra dogmatic leap and declare honey is, by its very nature, sweet. See the difference? They act based on how things seem, without making these huge, rigid claims about how things really are. And that kind of brings it all back home, to us, right now. The ancient skeptics were really offering a kind of therapy for the mind, a way to find a little peace in a world that is just full of disagreement. So I'll leave you with this to chew on. Which of your own deeply held beliefs about politics, about your career, about the world, which ones cause you the most stress and anxiety? And what might it feel like, even just for a moment, to just suspend judgment on them